Welcome to Sacred Conversations, a place where Dr. Nicole Dolan and I, Robin Bethel, along with a myriad of guests, explore some of the sacred threads and wholeness of life, held within the light and within the dark, held within the immensity. Thank you for being with us. In this episode, Nicole and I are joined by June Syndesi Kramer, a United Nations honored somatic practitioner, healer, and researcher, who, in addition to helping others heal multi-generational trauma, lives in rigorous devotion to clearing the blocks within herself to greater love. In this conversation, she generously shared with us a piece of herself, a self suffused with both softness and the deep grit of walking forward, hands open to both the light and the dark. We hope you enjoy listening.
So we have with us today June Syndesi Kramer, and we are so grateful to have you with us today, June. Thank you so much for being here. And June is with us to help us birth into life sacred conversations. So we're so grateful for you, and we'd love to just have you introduce yourself. So tell us who you are in the world to others, and what it is that you do.
I'm so happy to be here. I dearly respect Nicole, her husband, her family, and then all the impact she does outside the home and the balance that you carry in your heart, in your soul, and in your integrity and ethics and professionalism. So I just love you as a therapist, colleague, and friend. And I'm so honored to be here with you all at the birth and conception, inception date of this gift that you're giving to the world. My name's June, and I am a generational trauma researcher and wellness counselor. I'm doing my doctorate in somatic psychology right now. And I've had the privilege to travel to 30 countries, interview 15 different tribes before I went down the psychology route because I wanted to be an anthropologist. So I've always looked at the access and intersection point of spirituality, the tribal culture that we come from and the innate healing ability that we have as people, as tribes, as a species, and then the emergence of science and the emergence of genetics and epigenetics and neuroscience and the brain, and that convergence is my deepest passion. I know on this podcast you're asking me who I am in the world, and then I think there's another layer of who I am as a person. And as a person, I want to be someone who is continuously putting an effort and devotion to remove my blocks, unconsciousness to greater love. And so that comes in many forms of relationships, family, health, all of the taboos. I like to go there for myself and with others to resolve any shame and pain that I carry in the spectrum and arenas that life touches for me.
Beautiful. I really appreciate that. And yeah, we felt it would be a really unique way to introduce someone by asking that, right? It's like, who are you in the world to others? What is it that you do? And then also, like, who are you really? Like, what have you shown up on this planet as a soul to do? Right. And I think that you really spoke to that so beautifully.
And I can go in a layer deeper. I would say I was born as a water baby. I love feeling the weightlessness of the ocean and of all of the sacred rituals around the world that have to do with water and the rituals of water. And I start that with like who I am on the planet. When like people say, who do you know June as? The little like science girl, the research whore, they say I'm like the mix between Gandhi and Marilyn Monroe. Embrace your like full sensual joy and pleasure as a woman, but then also I can be like super hardcore uh Jedi when it comes to the spiritual path of discipline and devotion. And so the outside and then the inside, where I crave to feel weightless, I crave to feel carried by my ancestors, by the earth, by something much bigger than me. And that means I am constantly, in a way that could even be a little annoying to those who love me, devoted to the path of releasing the blocks to greater love. And what that looks like for me is embracing and embodying the generational healing, standing upon the ancestors who've come before me that have done so much generational healing. I'm from the Plymouth, line of the Mayflower, and I'm from the fleeing, European pogroms of the Jews. So we've got the Christian royalty and the Jewish side. And for me, it's really looked like standing on the gratitude for the ancestral and generational healing that's happened, the post traumatic growth that's happened from both of my ancestral lines, and then clearing any generational trauma when it comes to my beloved relationship, my family relationships. I'm from a blended family. I take a lot of pride in that because I think a lot of people are from blended families and they don't always realize how it shaped their empathy, compassion, and vast ability to own complexity. And so I am very proud to be from a blended family. And who I am on the planet, I'm constantly pushing my edge of where I feel triggered to go deeper there. And that could be in spirituality, it could be in the fact that I really struggled with my womanhood because I grew up with three brothers and all my cousins were boys, and what it meant to be a whole embodied woman, each person's own definition. That's been a growing edge for me, and that shaped my work and how I serve others today. And then community health and coexistence on the planet. I was honored at the United Nations for the work that I do with mental health. And it was because I've been so desperate to see this concept of coexistence and peace arise on the planet. And that's, a naive girl's dream because I believe that it starts inside my home with how I treat myself, my brothers, my parents, my partner, my fiance, husband to be, and my community members. And do I create spaces within my own home for different views, for different political views, spiritual views, lifestyle views to all be in the same room? And so gathering and supporting community health is a very important thing that I get to train and teach, but also practice myself. And so that's what I share more intimately about me as a soul.
Thank you. I feel like one thing that I don't really want to ask about deeper, but I just want to say is when you were talking about like recognizing the gifts of being from a blended family, and I don't remember your exact phrase, and I'm kind of annoyed with myself that I don't because I love how you said it. But you said the gift of them being able to be what did you the capacity for greater complexity? But what were the words that you used?
Um, it was around complexity, nurturing the capability to, for reality for me is incongruency and complexity. Like there's so much incongruency in myself and complexity. And when I
Mhm.
study blended families, it's like they don't recommend a blender where you put all the fruits and veggies and blend. They recommend a crock pot. Everyone can be themselves and we're just stewing together. We'll see what our flavor is going to end up
Mhm.
as. And my parents and those that I love will sometimes be hard on themselves that we don't know how to navigate blended families. But I think that is the earth, that is humanity. We don't know how to navigate all the tribes and the inter weaving that we have now due to technology. And very short time ago, we married for status and where the cows would go and, for duty. And now we fall in love with someone, in the middle of Oklahoma that's in India. And there's a lot of convergence. There's a lot of incongruency and complexity. And that's the reality I'm looking to have more compassion, space, capacity to honor. But I, until very recently, really felt like this is my world. The way I see the world is correct. I don't truly believe it, but deeper layers were revealed to me of how I want to be of service to humanity, but also just the basis, which is in my partnership, and that the only reality I believe is incongruency and complexity. And this comes from Fish Gill's work, James Gill, who does a lot with navigating communication and conflict and coexistence and working on how to negotiate, but also how to find connection in places you never thought you could. And I think that happens all the time with parents and their children, with our siblings, with blended families, with the neighbor tribe.
Right now, I mean, we see the great divides that we are in. So as I hear you sharing this language and speaking about how it starts at home, and this is where this bridging and this generational, I mean, it goes back so far, but if we look at it even right now, it's like so necessary that we need to do the work starting with us, but eventually to bridge back together, even as a culture.
Yeah, and there's deep wounds physically, like I was watching a soul surfer and her arms bitten off. There's
Mm.
deep wounds if you have a sibling who's paraplegic or has a amputation due to war and violence. It's very visual, that wounding, but the wounding that's happening in our cultures and tribe due to the inundation, like being indoctrinated from everything like so close with social media on your phone, creates even more internal wounds and divide that we don't always choose, due to the influence of interacting with news and media, and that's why I'm very devoted to the path of bridging and interfaith and intercultural, interracial, and really just humaning. But I've caused great wounds, great damage myself from my own unconscious, not being able to hold the incongruency or complexity of two people coming together, two families coming together. And that's the path of repair that I am devoted to in my own relationship, but humanity, and so I'm very vulnerable because I trust and respect Nicole so much, but what's coming through is surprising me because it's a very macro and micro
Mm.
conversation that we're having
Mhm.
right now
Mhm. Mhm.
around my mission that I so fumbly and stumbly and, very much unskillfully live out as a person. I might be a helpful teacher or counselor, but, you know, in terms of my incongruency and complexity and wholeness, there's a lot of layers there.
Gosh, I appreciate that so much. I'm like, I just have to like hold that for a moment because I feel like it's been for so, let me think about how I want to say this because so very aware that we're speaking at the micro and the macro level. And I think there's so much beauty to that for us each to really feel into what we're talking about as far as like the individual journey and the collective journey and how it's actually the same, but we're holding that process right on a micro scale or a macro scale. And then I love that you're sharing, like, I am this deep wisdom woman who has spent time in, 30 countries with all of these different tribes. And I've been honored and I know your work is just, I mean, it's so beautiful. It's profound, right? And then I also hear you showing up as, and I am also a human in a really messy world trying to also take all of my beautiful lessons and honor them and be conscious about them in my own life and bring them into application in the now in my own space. And so, like, a simpler way of saying that too, and like what's coming up for me is like, yeah, it's like, I stand in my career fully grounded as, woman and practitioner and clinician and healer and then I go home and I have to like remember that and practice that and, work on nervous system regulation when I've got, a child running into walls for fun or like whatever it is that's coming up in our own personal lives. And I'll clarify that and kind of wrap it there by saying, like, I've said to clients so many times in the last like 2 or 3 years, like, the days of people really projecting onto the healer, if you want to call it that, or whatever, the practitioner, whatever it is, as the all-knowing being are gone because we are also so involved in our stuff. Like we're also affected by what's happening on a collective scale. And we always have been, but I think we're showing a little bit more of our messiness now. And equally, we are also people that are showing up to do the work. And I think that that's what you're speaking to too, which is really important.
And normalizing, I mean, Esther Perel's work is very influential because she counsels in 7 languages. She, speaks 9, and she takes a very cross cultural, historical context to all relationship psychology and relationship therapy. She's done 30, 40 years. And this isn't exactly what she says, but I'll use an example of. So what she says is, for most of history, and Gabor Mate's work touches on this as well, like we lived closely in tribes. We'd hear people making love next door. We'd hear people fighting. Things were normalized of the complexity and congruency and fullness of what it is to be human. And now we have the instant gratification DoorDash. We have the constant comparison. We're all addicted to social media, which we know all the tech executives say is made off of slot machines, loss aversion, fear of missing out, and dopamine hits. Like the way we're interacting with our world is very unsustainable. But to go off of Esther Perel's work, with how we were historically and how we're at this convergence time of very different way of relating, that we almost we're at this place of having to completely redefine. It's a very exciting time with much opportunity, but much pain. For the shamans and the healers throughout time, you know, in my heart, my belief is, you'd go to the shaman's hut or you go to the healer's hut, and then you'd see that their son could be an addict, and or their son could be, bipolar or have like these very maladaptive behaviors, and you'd see the wholeness, and you'd see the grief, and you'd see the sorrow, and you'd see someone with incredible capacity. For usually the shamans, like, were they do that, they didn't see anything separate, so they do the internal healing, the external, all the herbalism, all the diet, all the movement, all the career advice back in the day, and the psychological and emotional and spiritual component. There wasn't separate. And so I know Nicole has a gift of spirituality in her work as well. But there was this normalization of humanness and being able to shift roles. But because of social media, I have a feeling we put people on pedestals, and we're seeing that one sided opinion of what they should be, rather than embracing ourselves wholly and other people wholly. And so it's rare to even find, people who can switch in and out of seeing someone's growing edges and then seeing their humanness and having compassion for them in this new influencer and this new branding and coaching and therapy age. And so I pray for more compassion, for more, I would say, there's a word like humility, to be teachable, but also um, the right word will come. It's like this reverence and patience and acceptance. I would say
Authenticity.
gentleness, grace.
Yeah.
What I think of when you were talking about that too is, and I wouldn't say I'm an expert in, all the definitions of what it means to be a shaman, but I read somewhere once that a shaman is someone who can go into the darkness or even like the brink of insanity, come into that darkness in a way where it's almost like such dissolution, but then come back. And so if you are in that role where you can do that, of course, that journey is going to have fractures and fissures that result from it. When you're talking about the shaman's son having various things, it's like in these journeys that bring you into that, but then the ability to come back. Of course, everything will always be perfect in all the places, even if you've assimilated all this wisdom. The process of getting there is messy, but then has such gifts because all of our cracks provide openings into our growth and our own greatest gifts. So we all need to have some, and it's just trusting the composition of the whole. So I like that you said seeing the fractures and fissures that might be also present within someone that you hold as holding so much wisdom. It's like that doesn't shield you from all this. And
It
Yeah.
actually gives me more permission to be whole,
Mhm.
because I've had so much of recovering perfectionism. And I think our social media model takes and puts so many people on pedestals. So I wish that I was seeing the fullness of those that I looked up to and those that heal me. And like, then I get to give myself grace and space to be full and not think I'm going to, what I was very identified with one day was, I'm going to reach this point where I'm fixed, I'm healed, and then
Mhm.
I would put these people I respected and looked up to in a box. And that actually wasn't helping me because it was creating an unrealized unrealistic expectation for myself, subconscious that one day I'll be just this perfect package, and that's not real. So there's great, I would say, a tremendous gift in allowing for the wholeness to be, and getting out of the superficial of what should be or what could be, or these you know the ideal, into the reality, and being in that, and defining our life as artists and working with what we have.
I think it's so interesting that this is coming up, and I find myself kind of grounding into if I was like in a client session, like what would really be coming through. So I often, when I'm working with clients, will make things very practical and sometimes humorous. And so I'm really feeling into this idea because it sounds, I mean, it's profound and it's also simple. And yet also, I really believe it speaks to the time that we are in on a collective scale of chaos. People experiencing so much chaos and disharmony with this feeling of like, I need to get to the destination, right? Like, I used to think healing was a destination as well, right? Like, I will finally be in that circle of healers and then all will be well. And there's so much dissonance in feeling that chaos if we don't do the work to actually bring ourselves into more peace with what you're saying, June, which is like just that we are all human and the wholeness of that journey. And so what's coming up for me is a couple of years ago, I had gone from you know, leading 25 therapists with quite a shield on. You know, I'm a very authentic person, but like I'm the boss, right? Like I need to hold this position and this like I need to be a certain way, right? Like we know all the things that are expected of us as women. Like if there's a child that's screaming, you know, on the other side, like dad better grab them so that nobody hears them, etc. So of course I was working in an office then, but then that transition, my father passed away and I had a new baby and I had somebody working for me at the time taking that role because I was off work in both grievance and also new life. And that fell through. She wasn't able to continue to take that role, and I couldn't find anyone to fill it. So all of these therapists that still needed their license hours, et cetera. So I start working again from a closet with my little diploma hung behind my head and my Zoom camera, you know, from the neck up because I'm nursing a baby. I've got a screaming autistic child downstairs. You know, I've got an ADHD kid bouncing off of walls. I'm in deep grief and disharmony, and my life was just a disaster. and 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 yet beautiful in those ways too. But and I'm just thinking of that image because I think it really brings to life what it is that we are also like saying, right? And it was a journey too. It was the beginning of a journey of like, I'm going to have to step more into this wholeness and I'm going to have to show more of this too. And it really speaks to me as, once again, like something that's so profound, but also simple, but a really good, like, simple explanation of like, yeah, it doesn't, it's that is life. Like, there are so many pieces to all of us.
I feel like I'm right next to you, like in this communal healing of the permission slip that you're giving for all high achieving and high ranking professionals in the therapy field, of the real life behind the scenes, in real life, IRL, and the humility, but also the permission to just be in the process, and like know that the other side is coming, but also like you can do it while you're here in the unknown of that time that you were in, and still showing up with so much service. In the business accelerator I have for women, I share like those that are most successful and serve at the highest level on the planet, they just show up the best they can each day. And that's been the big kind of, I'd say, barrier for a lot of people wanting to be of service, thinking they have to arrive somewhere to
Right.
then be of service one day. And I am so moved by that share because it is so real, and I feel like so many people need to hear what it's really like, to be of service when we're called to service in this field.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
So I feel like we might segue into asking you a special question. And Robin and I were talking about this as far as like, what do we want to ask our guests on this podcast? And we were really resonating with this idea of asking people, as we'll ask you, to share a sacred story. And that can be, I mean, I don't have to say this to you, but I feel like anything is sacred. So it can really be any story that you want to share, but the intention really being for us to hold space for a fragment of your story, which is, of course, only a part of the whole. So I will open that up to you, June.
Yeah, I'm honored to be asked that question. I don't think I meditated too deeply on it before we were in the energy of being together. And what comes up, I get to just trust. The story that is coming alive in me because of the themes that we're sharing is on the theme of betrayal in humanity. And I love Aftab Omer, the president of the university that one of the universities that I attend, Meridian University. And he said, "You're about to, go through this experience with colleagues and classmates, and you're in community. So that means inevitable betrayal will happen." And that word kind of jarring for me. Inevitable betrayal. That's a very harsh word. I think of very violent, acts or, psychologically violent, harsh acts when I think of the concept of betrayal. And so I had some time to chew on that concept and I hadn't fully bloomed within me. And when we talk about humanity and choosing a new path forward with how we want to treat the microcosm for the macro, our family members, our friends, our neighborhood, colleagues, how we want to do business, clients, I was preparing to get married and get engaged, and my partner and I are doing a lot of front loading with our own life history and our own baggage. And for me, I had this intense toilet anxiety. I was always running to the toilet for about a year and a half. And I could feel like my root chakra kind of resetting, being like, kind of no grounding, so much fear of this concept of getting married and what that would mean, which means like I felt like I was really going to be out of control because my control issues were rearing their head and I was not going to be able to call the shots for my life anymore. I was so afraid like all of my agency would be taken away to partner and have this union occur. And I would have like hard, dark voices, and I would have a lot of harshness that I knew wasn't from my soul. And so we're not doing any diagnosing on the podcast, but everyone go down their own psychological or spiritual path because we're going into sacred conversations, which means I'm going to share the spiritual aspect of who I am and how I live. Doesn't mean it's always how I work because I work client directed. So I'm very protective and I'm very diligent to honor someone's belief system. And so not every person I work with has the same belief system as me or has to, or will have the same experiences. So I don't always share exactly certain stories. This one's more personal because I don't like to give someone an expectation of what their healing will look like because oftentimes our healing surprises us. And so I was having some toilet anxiety in the middle of the night and I was feeling so much darkness and I was really in a hard place. And I was kind of vomiting, diarrhea, all the things. And I finally said, I'm going to face this darkness. Like, okay, I'm going to face this. What do I don't think this is about my partner. I know I could switch out my partner for someone else. I could blame my partner. I just don't think this is about him, even though the ego likes to kind of, in my opinion, trick and redirect the focus instead of being on my work. So I sat there in the bathroom where most spiritual experiences happen, right? The toilet, the shower, crying in the car, in the garage. And I faced this moment, and I had a lot of visions or visuals, some people call past lives, depending on the belief system, of extreme betrayal. I was seeing like very violent images from history, like ripping hearts out, backstabbing, torture scenes, very violent layers that my consciousness and my soul took me on, soul or ancestral memory. And I had to take a moment to really acknowledge and accept that long-term relationships, if we're talking macro, humanity, tribes, civilization on Earth, or micro, marriage, there's inevitable betrayal that's usually unintended pain that happens from self-preservation or, wanting others to feel our own pain. And I had to, in that moment, I was kind of initiated in a kind of violent way with the visuals and the body symptoms of like, I'm signing up for inevitable betrayal to choose to trust someone, to make a new family member, to get married. That is the origins of history. And we oftentimes don't continue forward. We hold that and we create wars and we separate. And something happened in me that I acknowledged, I accept this. I've seen it in my own parents. I've seen it in my own, aunts and uncles who I trust and respect. And they had to find a way to navigate through betrayal and through, the fear of past unconscious, unskillful choices their partners made to trust and to deepen their love and forgiveness and live their higher virtues or values. And then I left the bathroom and got into the bed, and my partner, it was like 3 a.m., was like, would you like to pray for Israel and Palestine? And I was like, I know he's the one. He doesn't know exactly what I'm going through, but he knew I was very tortured during that season. And his like great, I'm trying to find a spiritual, like his spiritual power, his great like gifts of being an incredible man. Um, it was a very powerful moment for me because anything I could have projected on my fear of the future of he and I was all my ancestral fear. It's all my soul, my, conscious fears that I might have seen in my parents' own marriage, that I might have seen and had to resolve myself. And so he didn't know what I was going through. He knew I was struggling, and we prayed, you know, for the destruction, the betrayal, the talk about brother and brother fighting. Um, and I slept well and I cleared that. But it had been a year of great torment, and it was not what I was expecting as a healing antidote or remedy to be revealed when I had the courage and surrender to see what I wasn't willing to see. And that is, inevitable pain, inevitable betrayal. Unconsciously do we hurt another. And I'm very fortunate to have a partner who's dedicated to the work of consciousness and repair. And no matter, if we are different, if we come from different places, there's the core of what all, great families and tribes and people practice, which is trying to live higher virtues. So that's the story that came in context of what we are talking about and that I don't often share.
Um, Earlier when you were describing who you were in the world, um, but on a deeper level, it's something that stood out to me and like I've wanted to come back to, but then we are just flowing in other directions. But I feel like I feel it kind of now. But you talked about a great pull in your soul to like continually let go of, release like all the blocks within you that keep you from being loved, and also like a deep desire to feel held, and like flow and be held within like the universal current. And so I feel like the story that you just shared is such an illumination of those things, right? Like you did something that let go of a block, like but and not in a fast way, right? You said you were tortured for like a year in this like internal struggle with it, but then like it brought you to releasing a block in a way. And this part, I don't want to like define too much because I feel like this might not be the piece or how you feel it, that it did it in a way that in some form like enabled you to be held deeper, like to embrace like this union and this love that like has the power to hold you. So that feels like so powerful. Like these are the things you're drawn to in how you are in the world. And you gave us a story that really does illuminate both of those so much. Like I feel it, like I could let myself cry, but
I was going to say, I can feel that.
but it like, and it was like such a beautiful sharing of that because it wasn't really a super fast process. Like in the scheme of things, a year is fast. Like in historic time and like global time, it's like nothing. But in the space of a year, to be in that internal like deep struggle with it, like you had to be in the muck of it for a while before you came into the space where you let it go, and it's probably like all the things that happened in that time, like were in some way needed, right? Like maybe you could have let it go in like one, I don't know, like I'm not saying you could have, but sometimes we let things go quickly in a healing session or this or whatnot, but it's like that's not always the way it's meant to. And it also illuminates what we all need to heal is different all the time. And like we can't speak to it. Like it might not be better to just have something leave and clear in a way where we don't have a year of torture. Like what does the year of torture like bring to us into the wholeness,
There was a lot. It was about a 2-year process, and my mother was also going through a heavy detox process herself. And so there was a lot maternally that was clearing through both of us in different ways. Her and I we clear differently. And because I don't tell that story often and had the gift and, respect for you all to share it, I see that in this moment, I see that I acknowledge love and commitment and devotion for the light and dark, and the maiden to the mother, the maiden to the wise woman transformational archetypal journey is the maiden wants everything to be happy, fantasy, joy, and it happens sometimes for people 10 years into marriage, that they're like, this, as the female, is not what I signed up for. I didn't sign for the dark, backstabbing, ripping my heart out, the visuals. I just signed up for the joy, pleasure, ecstasy, bliss, orgasm, taking care of her. And so to acknowledge and commit to 75 years or eternity, whatever people call union and marriage, it was for me to acknowledge, welcoming, allowing the inevitable pain that is part of transformation and oneness and wholeness, union. So thank you for letting me reflect as I shared.
Mhm. Yeah. And thank you for sharing that with us.
I feel like in a way we kind of began almost immediately with how who you are on a deep level now unfolds into the world and these things that pull and call to you. There's some deep soul call for you to continually let go of all these blocks within yourself to love, to being love, and this call to like being held, to be, floating in the water. And another thing you say often is devotion. I love that word.
You guys are real time in my initiation. I had an allergic reaction to that word until a month ago. I hadn't been an integrated soul essence being until now with that concept at all. I was very resistant. It's a very feminine quality for me. So it's funny that I'm with the great women, the wise women, and your all's birth and conception of this project to be in a different place with that concept. So I just want to give full disclosure there.
No, that's so interesting because so my question, and then one other thing too that I kind of feel like these are textures of your soul. Like I would maybe say, like this texture, like a desire to be held by the invisible current, like the divine, the texture of like knowing this call, like meant to let go of these blocks. Like the texture, I was going to say like the draw to devotion, but now it's a different one. It's like the aversion to the word devotion and then like a claiming of it. And then also you talk a lot about holding together the dark and the light, which I feel like is an everything sort of texture too. So I know these are like a handful of things, but maybe whatever you feel like, what textures feel most alive in you? When do you feel like you felt these textures within you?
I think the first thing I'll share is so healers, um, we are, in my opinion, it's a projection in this work because we want to level up and heal at a whole nother level, as transparently as Nicole shared, moving and changing her life to be the micro of the macro and still being of service. And she shared the details of that and the humanness. And when I was in that process, I officiated 2 weddings. And I'm usually asked to do. I was asked to officiate 2 weddings that talk about union, love, and being a steward and facilitator for that, and lots of ceremonies and retreats, and we show up. In my opinion, I feel like many healers will listen to this podcast when we have the courage to be doing our own work, even if we don't know what it looks like on the other side of the tunnel, what going through looks like, what getting through whatever our mess is. We're giving transference, again, a positive way of the term, of the capacity for grit, resilience, and devotion to show up, to be an instrument of transformation. I very much identify with this concept of devotion because I identify with the concept of alchemy. And so when you talk about removing the blocks to greater love, showing up for the process, it's a very artistic, alchemical process. And there's an ecstasy and a bliss in being a servant and surrendering to the greater will of the moment, of God, of whatever's present. And I think I really enjoy life. Younger, I really enjoyed it. I became more cynical or jaded. But in my teenage years, like, I just love to party. I love to dance. I love to stay up, and I love to just be enthralled with whoever I was meeting. I had very much that like whimsical kind of delight and amazement and awe. So I think that another word would be the great like awe of the universe and life and the pleasure that's there. And I think that I'm re-emerging into that maiden curiosity, innocence, after seeing as much as I have, even though I'm very young. I know younger people who are even more cynical or even more, you know, I would call it desensitized to the joys and the pleasure. And the path for me is resensitizing to expand my capacity to feel and transmute. And that I really love, like my husband to be as an artist, and he's gifted in many areas, but I really like identifying as an artist because my mom said, your grandmother's painter. We kind of paint. We're not big painters, but you can never make a mistake when you make art. And so identifying and living life as art, I very much, studied Salvador Dali and Andy Warhol, and I was into those movements of artists and how they were constantly. Dave Chappelle was a huge influence. Comedians, they can go all the way into the most tender, gruesome part of humanity and come all the way out. I think they're some of the most intelligent humans that I've ever met, comedians, because they're very smart intellectually, how they can hold many incongruencies at once and make something light. And I have never spoken about my love of water. Maybe I live in the desert now in Sedona and the Red Rocks, and I grew up on the water. But there's something I want to share around the question you asked around alchemy and transmutation and miracles in a way, like seeing the transformation is something I'm very interested in, and seeing someone who takes a really shitty life and makes something beautiful out of it. That's an artist to me. When we're talking about shamanism, it's making me think of a mentor of mine named Mooks from Australia, who was like a very undercover shaman. He was a park ranger, and many Aboriginals are native, I would say indigenous peoples probably do become land managers and park rangers and like take care of the land because they're connected to the codes and the what the land needs, and they have the ancestral memory and history and stories. And I ended up doing some shamanic work with him, but he was very private. Like only if you asked him would he tell you. He prepared James Cameron for Avatar. He took him around the bush teaching, the native culture, the spirituality, the flora, and Nicole Kidman for the movie Australia. He's an incredible man. But oftentimes with wise women or men, you find them by accident. Some of the most incredible, most skilled practitioners are not very public, oftentimes. And he would share with me that his grandfather, who raised him spiritually, could put his hand on someone and wipe up his arm to vomit out their sickness. And I knew these things existed, if people remember the ancient wisdom and they're trained in a very specific way. Most shamans, like they interact in society a very specific way. They eat a very specific way. They live a specific lifestyle so that they can be of service in a very specific way and not have the amount they're seeing on the spiritual and physical realm wreck their life. And so that thought came and that ability came, and his grandfather chose him out of all of the children to raise and give the shamanic wisdom to, and he was the whitest one. He didn't have the darker skin. And so he grew up in the bush, but he didn't even have those skills. He had a different way of healing and shrinking tumors and things. He didn't even have the skills that his grandfather had, but his grandfather was trained and connected to the earth and the memory of the earth and the wisdom. And so when we talk about removing certain layers, when I talk about that and transmuting, it's also for certain capacity. I have never said this, but I don't like the way I'm going to say it, but gifts to come back online. And it's not a gift for others to see in me or for me to even use for others, but for how I can experience the world with more awe, pleasure, joy, excitement when I clear certain ways of seeing the world mentally, emotionally, spiritually. I can commune and be at one and be in awe of the diversity and respect people I would in the past not have respected, see beyond my own self. And so that's what came up from that.
And we will trust that that is exactly what was meant to come up.
Yes. And I'm going to add something that feels like a trivial note, but I just was, I thought it was interesting. It's not keying into the depth of what you were saying, but just like this one piece when you said that when you were younger, you were kind of a bit of a party girl, is how I took that.
Couldn't party, but
Like,
I was like ready to have a party at 7 years old, 12 years old, like at my parents' like potluck. Like everyone like, let's
okay,
dance together. Like I
okay.
wanted to make the most of life. I couldn't really do the real party thing because my body couldn't handle the drugs and alcohol. But even younger than teenage, like I was just ready like to get all my uncles to like dance and like play games and the
Yeah.
childlike nature to remember that, we're all young at heart.
Like the tendency in that it ties to this tendency like within myself to love like abandon, which can be like so deeply beautiful and spiritual, right? Too, to like throw yourself into that abandon, um
Yeah.
along with joy and everything.
I like the word love with abandon because I think that when we're trained to be specialists and healers in the Western, we're trained to be in our head and label and get out of our heart, get out of our body, get out of our joy. You know, I say to my clients, like, you're doing so much work in the deep realm of trauma and resilience and post traumatic growth and post traumatic, stress. Like, you're in the muck, you're doing the deep work, and so I feel like you're in the deep end of the pool treading water, and then you become addicted to treading water all the time. But go up to the shallow end and have a pina colada and dance to the music and, like, bump booties with your friend and, like, remember to listen to, pop culture and read a shitty magazine and, like, play this life. I think I was really speaking to the fact that I became serious and felt that this journey of healing was such a serious, harsh endeavor rather than, why am I doing all this deep work? Am I not going to be able to play with my husband anymore? No, we only hang out when we go to couples therapy. We only connect over the intensity of solving problems versus, I'm doing all of this to get back to the joy of the universe and dance, under the moonlight, and the play and the joy, I think, on the healing path sometimes gets, I would say, shrunken. And that's why a lot of the rewilding is coming for therapists and corporate women. I have been asked to create a program, rewilding the corporate woman, because we've forgotten how to play. And we don't want to play in a way that we're, unconscious and numb, and we can only play when we're drunk, or we can only play, some women when they cheat on their husbands, or, like, I'm really opening the covers here. They get into a mode of who they have to be to enjoy once they become adults, once they become professionals, and to reimagine and remember how to play and enjoy no matter the stage of life that I'm in or the harshness that I've seen in the world, is, like, why I'm here, to remember my childlike nature and stay young.
And like holding together all the things. So I feel like with that sense of the pool, it feels like once you do just kind of relax, it's like it allows that space for all the things you've gathered to just like assimilate, into the whole, like your water. I don't remember if you said water baby or like
Water
water
baby.
child. Yeah. Like I feel that there. And I just also want to say before we get too far away from it that I love how you feel life as art, and not to pivot, but like I feel life as poem, which Nicole and I have talked about a lot, but it feels like a very similar idea where it's like within art, you said there are no mistakes, within a poem, like it all belongs. It's just to me, life feels like a poem because it holds like all of the like indefinable tensions, and not tension in a bad way, but like how everything comes together and exists within this web, like the tension of the web that exists in the fullness. And that's like life is art too.
That's
Mhm.
exactly where I was going, because I was gonna say, when I get to float and feel God's embrace and feel held, some people say Holy Spirit, whatever language people use, then I remember the reason I'm on earth, which is to be an aspect of God's love and a creator. And so I'm a singer and a dancer. So right before you said poet, I'm like, when she just drew that image of me laying in the water, then I can write a song, or I could sing, or I could dance. And that's how I believe I was put here, to enjoy God or the universe splendor. And so I think that when I clear, when I feel the support, when I feel the purpose, when I feel the connection and the allowance for everything to be, then I remember my creator consciousness and, come back to, I feel that many of us are here to be creators and to live out the creation that the universe or God has put in each of us.
Yeah, I was gonna jump in there and say too, I think that part of where that gets lost is we have this inner wild, right? We have a wild woman archetype, like we have a part that has been so repressed. And so I really appreciate the conversation. I'm a very playful and like it's so person, I was gonna say, but let me finish that. But it's so important to me, right? I can't imagine living without like joy and laughter and friendship and, just and I know that I feel like people are like, yeah, of course, like we all feel that way, but really I think to really tap into that wild, I think what you were speaking to, June, you had said something about well, I'm not going to remember the exact words, but I think it's so important for us to rewild, right? Like reawaken that part of us and let it be a part of our wholeness. Permission, that's the word I was thinking of. It's like you almost do need permission though, right? I'll even speak to this from just like an energetic space, right? Like it's like we're holding this space together, we're in this sacred space, we're holding this podcast, we're talking about deep, real, important things. And every time I have a story that's kind of like erupting in me, like, oh, let me tell you about like, how I can give you the perfect example of this as like a complete chaos storm or like or a giddiness or whatever. Anyways, these stories just come up and there's a part of me that will be like, oh wait, hold on. Like let's continue to stay present and in sacred space and focused on whatever it is that we're focused on and so I give myself permission for that, obviously, along the way too. But it's been a process and a journey too to even allow just authentic self to fully show up however it wants to, right? And to trust that that's okay. So I do think permission has come up a few times in our conversation today. It's we really do need to give ourselves and each other permission to be.
Be a permission slip for others. I know there's lots of people who don't like me. That I'm not going to be everyone's cup of tea. And then some people are going to be like, "Oh, that was the permission slip I needed for wholeness and for full spectrum living and authenticity to not look for that permission like I did for so many years,
Mm.
so many other places." Then, like you're saying, giving that permission to myself, and seeing other people when there could be comparison or jealousy as a permission slip to be more of what I see them embodying.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Mm.
Mm. I feel like the word wild does speak to a lot of what we've said. It's like it just has like a connotation of that messiness. Um, and I think like culturally, the desire to like stay in the positive and the light, like in a way, is like not, it's outside of the wildness. So I think it's also just, yeah, the messiness of the fullness and like trying to have everything curated and clipped and just like the sunny side, like you lose a lot for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
Mm. Well, thank you. Okay. Do you know your astrology? Are you
Yeah,
interested in astrology, June?
I do. I know my astrology. I am a Sagittarius, Cancer rising, Virgo moon, and I believe I'm like Aries 10th house. I'm either Sag or Scorpio, Venus. I think
Mm.
it's Venus.
Not to go too deeply into that, but I feel like the draw to the water, Cancer is a water sign. You probably know, right? So, and just a fun fact that's only interesting just to me. But I'm a Cancer sun, Sagittarius rising. So we've got like those energies, but flipped.
Wow.
So, how I hold sun sign is kind of like our heart, our center. And then I think of rising sign as the path our soul will be asked to walk in the world. So
Mm,
it's like to me, Sagittarius is so much, it's like the teacher, the writer, the philosopher, the sage, right?
mm,
And then Cancer is like the nourisher, the nurturer. So it's interesting. It's like that center of teacher, center of like sage, that then like you're asked to walk this path in the world that like being the sage is then like the nourishing, like which I feel like it does do because so you do all this work with generational healing and everything. So, like, through what you can teach, I see that tie to the mother. You're like helping them
Mhm.
mother themselves. And I don't know.
I love this because
Interesting.
I was told by an astrologer a bunch of Scorpio in your chart. Trauma, trauma, trauma. You need to. you need to stay on that path. And what's so funny is in human design, I have like the father line, apparently. It's the line of mating and fertility. And my greatest healing is with the feminine, the motherhood, the matriarchal line, and becoming a mother, children. And so, isn't it funny that my greatest edge for my own development, for my own breakthroughs, is what is like a purpose, to mother, in a way,
Yeah.
collectively. It's funny.
Yeah. My so I'm a double Capricorn. Um, but my north node is in Cancer, and so I'm like in many ways because I'm also like Capricorn, and then almost everything else is Aquarius. And so
Oh,
like, I'm always like I don't want to say like a contradiction, but like I equally hold like both sides of like everything. And so, but the mother, the Cancer in the North Node, that's where our challenge is, right? Like it's so interesting to be like this incredibly like grounded, career woman who can study this and take on this and whatever, right? And then step into role as mother and wife that many other people find. I mean, of course, there's challenges that come with that, no doubt, but like many women find that to be a very comfortable space, a very
mhm.
comfortable role to step into, at least in the beginning. And for me, it hasn't been. It's been like my greatest challenge to actually like step into those roles. And then in my own personal journey as mother and wife is so amplified like throughout the whole journey, but like literally Scott and I had this moment last night where I was just like, "Oh my gosh, like I guess this piece from the past couldn't come through until you created space for it. So here it is," you know. But it's become this incredibly healing journey, but also very, very, very challenging. So yeah.
That's helpful because I'm a Sag North Node, but I don't know a lot about the North Node.
Okay.
I think of the North Node as like our destiny point. I could go real far down this hole, but we won't. But it is interesting because it intersects. Like you could have your North Node in Sagittarius. It could have a totally different tone and flavor from someone else with their North Node in Sagittarius, right? Because depending on your rising sign, it falls in a different house for you. And there's
Oh,
just all these different things. Like Nicole, like your North Node is the opposite of your sun sign and your rising sign. So there's like a natural opposition, which brings all its own like immensity and growth, right? My
Yeah.
North Node is in the same sign as my sun sign. So it's
oh,
like
With June, right? Because
her,
you just
yes,
very
yes.
sense. Yeah.
Right. So it's almost like the destiny point, like that has its own intensity because like your destiny point is aligned with just like this center, this heartbeat. So it's like intense in that way. Like we have it, all three of us, it's intense, but in different ways. And then I think if someone's north node is in their rising sign too, just adding this layer of destiny, like sounding that chord around what's already like one of your biggest energies. So I feel like having it in opposition and the same is both very loud.
Those are probably the two loudest places that you could have it.
I feel like after that digression into astrology a little bit, I would just love to hear what you hold as a sacred texture inside of your soul, a texture that you feel as piece of divine or a piece of beauty that you really love.
mm, mm. I'm amazed with what's coming up, but I think same coin, different sides, rage and grief. So one of my initiations into healing is ripping my hair out, trichotillomania, excessive hair pulling, symbol of grief, great grief. Mona Lisa, lost a baby, no eyelashes, no eyebrows. I sing a lot of blues music, a lot of deep. Um, I'm influenced by a lot of, I would say, soul music, but a deep bellow. I studied a lot of the African diaspora, and influenced by a lot of music, from the slave calls to the, the formation of the early formation of bluegrass and soul and blues and jazz and the great grief, the great cry of humanity. And when I sing and when I perform, there's like, they're like, I didn't know a large Black woman lived in there. I very heavily was influenced by Black culture. And so um, dance and song is probably the strongest texture. It's something maybe more private, but also the most powerful form for me when it comes to healing. I have a lot of like past life visions that come through that I would not wish on anyone, because it's not like I was Nefertiti in a past life type vision. It's like the pains of humanity that I carry that I have to clear. And when I dance, sing, or make abstract art, I'm able to tap into a layer of grief and rage and process that through my body and sound and songs in a way that reconnects me to the divine. When I used to perform and sing, people were like, "Wow, that was amazing," or this and that. I'm so moved, and I was like, "I don't remember at all what happened." I kind of go into a different place. Pharrell Williams is an incredible artist and musician, and he's a genius. I mean, producer, and he would ask Florence Welch, Florence and the Machine. He's like, I think you go somewhere else when you sing, like a celestial place, or and the way he asked that question is how I feel when I sing. It's a place of solace, it's a place of safety for me, but also a place to investigate what in many cultures. I'm not going to say many cultures. That was uneducated in a way. North American culture doesn't portray as a safe emotion, which is rage and grief. It's a safe way for me to investigate and process the ancient and human rage and grief that I carry.
That's really beautiful. And I just want to say, I recently heard something where just the phrase like transmuting so much pain was a piece of it. And like, what a gift to the planet that is to like be someone who goes into these dark spaces and transmutes that pain into something else. Just wanted to say that like it's such a gift to the planet. I felt that, like it felt like a gift to hear that, and so I just wanted to say that and like to extend that, like to be able to go into those places, which I like Nicole, you do as well. Um,
Yeah. I jump in there and just say I appreciate what you're picking up on because I feel like right now, and I hear this so much from clients, is they're like, yeah, I want to see change in the world, but I feel like I don't have the ability to do anything, right? Like, what am I going to do about it? And I think that, you know, it might be a foreign concept to hear that, going in and tapping into your own inner work, your own inner rage, your own inner healing, your own inner child, etc., is actually healing to our planet. But what I want to say is, even if that was a foreign concept to anybody listening, I think that it's been explained beautifully by June today as to how that is really happening, right? And how we do have the power and ability to create change and healing not only in ourselves, right, on the micro scale, but also in the collective on this macro scale.
A lot of times nonverbal.
Work, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's not a logical or cognitive exercise. In some of my favorite research around trauma, torture survivors, war veterans, and hostages, the experience of art therapy, that's a quite nonverbal. When there's such deep grief and rage and pain, and when I'm having a very hard moment, I'll get the paints out because there's something I can express and process that I don't have to use my mind for, but it moves through me, or dancing and singing. And there's something, a different part of your brain that's being used to process the very primal, visceral unrest that needs to move through us. And Peter Levine is a huge influence for me, and his work in trauma and somatic psychology. I feel so privileged to be a part of this project today. Thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you for joining us. And I know, Nicole, you already knew and loved June, but I feel like it was just so beautiful for me to be able to see you. Early in the conversation, I didn't feel like speaking very much because I wanted to just let you and Nicole speak and just absorb. It felt like such a lovely gift to just be seeing you in that beauty that you hold, and I was more interested in almost just like receiving it and like luxuriating in the sense of it as you two were in your space. So, yes, thank you for bringing that beauty to us and letting me see you and letting Nicole see new pieces of you and whoever is meant to listen to this, seeing you too.
Thank you all.
Yeah. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for being with us today. If you feel called, follow the podcast wherever you listen and connect with us on Instagram or YouTube at sacred.conversations.podcast. And most of all, may you keep opening to yourself, to the mystery, and to the story within you that's still being written.